Before this video starts, I must state that there is spoilers for the previous games. If you have not completed them and wish to not be spoiled, get the hell out. And I'm saying that in the nicest way I can. What's up, guys and gals? Red Icing back again, and yes, more Persona. Today's topic is a large theory of mine, which could be completely wrong or finally identify the connections between the bosses and the theme of Persona 5. Do not, I repeat, do not take this as any sort of concrete info, even if it makes sense. It is a theory and can easily be disproven if someone finds one bit of information to contradict it. If it is wrong, it is all on me. Alright, with the disclaimer said and most people gone, since this is just speculation, let's dive in. As you read in the title, it is the societal control theory. What is it? Well, it's the supposed main antagonist plan in Persona 5 to destroy the world. As we know from Hoshino, the characters are being hunted down by a mysterious force. This unknown entity is very likely to be the final boss. Apparently, they must have interfered with its plans, and it is attempting to snuff them out. Thankfully, we have another force helping us. Before we go into specifics, let's look at the previous Persona games to help explain some later details. Before we get into the history, I must explain the significance of the terms Shadow Bleed and Focal Points. Shadow Bleed is the main avenue of the antagonist plans to penetrate and control the real world. Focal Points are the basis of operations after the Shadow Bleed infects an area enough. In Persona 3, we witness the Shadow Bleed emanate from the focal point known as Tartarus, then to the surrounding city. In Persona 4, we saw the Shadow Bleed from the fog that invaded the real world, but slowly over time, without a focal point. Shadow Bleed is the effective method of which the main antagonist plans to ruin or destroy the world. Whether it be fog, like Persona 4, or something similar to a base of operations like Persona 3, using this we can predict further outcomes in Persona 5 by attributing Shadow Bleed and focal points when it occurs. But before that, a little history lesson. To be more specific, let's look at each game. In Persona 3, the objective of the main boss is to destroy the world using one main focal point. You know it as Tartarus. From the creation of Tartarus also comes the Dark Hour, where shadows can roam in the real world on certain dates. This connection, / base, between the real world and the other was fortified and took a lot of effort, almost too much effort, to reach the top. The Shadow Bleed happened when the shadows freely roamed the city during the Dark Hour, exerting their control and causing chaos. However, Persona 4 took an entirely different route. Instead of a focal point, the Shadow Bleed happened simultaneously, slowly, and over time, everywhere throughout the city, and the entire city became a victim to the Shadow Bleed effect. Remember the scene where the main characters put on their glasses and realized the fog in the real world was just as the same as the fog inside the TV world? By not having a focal point like Persona 3, the Shadow Bleed worked as a dull pain, slowly enveloping the real world, but never truly overriding it. All the shadows and dungeons stayed inside the TV, leading to a conclusion that the real world wasn't breached as it was in the sense P3 was. And also, if I don't say this, I'm going to have a couple people on my ass. The original plot from both the original two Personas, Persona 2 having both Innocent Sin and Eternal Punishment, describes the conflict between two immortal beings, Philemon and Nyarlathotep. These two basic gods, Philemon being the righteous and Nyarlathotep being the devil, gambled over the merits of humanity during both P1 and P2. After these games, both swore never to show themselves to mortal human beings again. However, both of them had influences in later games. In that, Nyarlathotep has most likely been responsible for the turmoil in both Persona 3 and 4. The final boss of Persona 3 was an avatar of Nyx, and Persona 4 had a controlling spirit of fog that judged humanity and felt it necessary to destroy them. A clear reference to Nyarlathotep in both cases. In Persona 4, we save at locations marked by a magic butterfly. A reference to Philemon, as it is canon, Philemon transformed into a butterfly to help the protagonists of the game to accomplish their goal. It also ties in Igor as a servant of Philemon, even after Philemon departed from the real world. I know you all are saying, enough of the stuff we know already. Tell us what the theory is and how does this Shadow Bleed thing fit into Persona 5? Well, here it goes. As given evidence from the trailers and articles, the society in Persona 5 is shitty and filled with shitty people, specifically adults. Well, this is the focus of the theory. The main antagonist in Persona 5 will have to retake control of society and defeat the final boss before the destruction of the world. In both Persona 3 and Persona 4, the Shadow Bleed fails because of the mistake in focal points. Only one strong one or none at all. Persona 5 seeks to up the ante, so to speak, by creating multiple focal points and taking over society so any would-be opponents would have to fight on two fronts. Those two fronts being the antagonists themselves and the societal structures it controls. However, to take over society is no easy task, especially if it's a hidden influence. How does one even begin a monumental undertaking? The answer is to slowly root into it and change it and then become the new normal. To demonstrate this, I have placed an image of a blocked pyramid. Each block of the pyramid is considered a portion of society. They are stacked in a hierarchy with the most affluent and influential at the top, while the bottom row is the poorer and powerless classes of society. If the block is blue, then it is unaffected by the shadow bleed. If it is red, well, guess what? It's been infected. There are 3 ways to go about taking over society by sequentially taking over each block so that it can eventually have influence over surrounding blocks. The first way to take over is by controlling the top and letting all below it fall into place. Yay, Reaganomics! This method is classic as it has been used constantly throughout history to subjugate a new people after a war has ended. If you think of the medieval era of history, it helps. First step is to take control of the top block, which represents the current rulers of that society, as well as the upper class around them. From there, the rulers use their lieutenants to help control the sergeants below them, and then the sergeants control the people below them. By seizing control of the highest point, the rest of the pyramid falls into place with both fear and respect for the class above you. However, this method can only work if the top blocks can directly control those beneath them, as in a dictatorship or a monarchy. The second way is the direct opposite. First, you get all the lower blocks under the influence, then you work your way up by controlling the base, which is necessary for the blocks above them to stand on. You can slowly begin to take over row after row until the top caves in to the demands of the bottom. Whether this happens in a violent revolutionary type way or a peaceful protesting type way is insignificant. The point is, suddenly the tip of the hierarchy has everything ripped out from under them and they must conform to it or be replaced. This method works in any government type if the abuse from the top finally crosses the line and the people from the bottom finally rise up to confront it. The method described above works best in republic-type societies and democracies as the power of the top is directly derived from all below them, either directly or through representatives. These representatives can either be new leaders working for change, celebrities hoping to gain more attention and love from both current fans and potential fans, or unsavory characters at the bottom looking to make money and power from this unbalanced point in history by taking advantage of the world around them. Either way, ripping out the bottom blocks is what can automatically topple the top. At least some of you must have played Jenga. The third and final way is to combine the previous 2 methods and bring change to the society. By controlling both the top and the bottom, the middle must follow suit whether they like it or not. To do this, the influence affects the bottom rung and the top of the hierarchy and slowly makes waves to control other blocks until most of them are in check. There can also be some of the middle at the start affected by this, which makes it more controlling. This method can work in any sort of environment, but takes a lot of initial effort to begin. Before I move on, I know that some of you are asking, why can't you start from the middle and expand outwards? Well, both the bottom and the top have considerable power over the middle. The middle stands on top of the bottom, and to remain in the middle, these people of society must follow orders from the top. The middle of society is a state of reasoning and understand that they rely on both of the top and the bottom to keep their position. If the middle acts up, the bottom seeks to replace them, and the top tries to condemn them. It doesn't work in a societal manner for the middle to rise up. Just look at modern things. Middle class is lower, and everybody, pick your positions. The third option is where Persona 5 fits best. This is where the focal points come in. As you see in this example, the focal points were placed in certain locations to influence a block. The focal points are scattered, but installed in a correct order to take over society. These focal points are not locations like the previous games, but rather dungeon bosses. From the coach example, we know that the coach controls the school he works for, influencing both the staff and the students. The celebrity artist controls the art gallery, affecting the art scene and the fans of the artist, which can also bleed over into popular media. The Yakuza boss established his control from the casino, dominating the criminal underground and all of their victims. If the police chief and politician turn out to be bosses, then the efforts of the Shadow Bleed and focal points have enough influence to control society, making the final goal of the antagonist easier to accomplish. Well, until the Phantom Thieves step in, at least. Persona 3 and 4 both failed to truly grasp this concept of hiding in plain sight. Persona 3 tried using just one focal point, calling attention to itself. Persona 4 almost worked by removing the focal points entirely and indirectly causing problems in an attempt to slowly envelop the city until it was too late. These plans could have succeeded if it wasn't for those meddling kids. My point of all this video is this. By the start of Persona 5, the mysterious entity that represents the main antagonist has considerable amount of influence. Society is in shambles. Protests occur in the streets. Teenagers are complaining about it. No one seems to be making a difference. Enter the Phantom Thieves. The main characters work outside of the law and the system currently set by society to combat this societal sickness, or societal overhaul, depending on what you think of it. There is no other way to go about it since the Shadow Bleed and the focal points are slowly taking control of the entire system. If this theory is correct, it is the true underlying conflict of Persona 5. If it is wrong, well, shit. I wasted the time of the viewer as well as my own for making this crap. Well, that's it for this video. Do you have any questions? Am I blatantly wrong in some areas? Do you have any theories of your own? Leave a comment with red at the beginning and I will get back to you. Next week's video will be about the new or revamped attack system and equipment of the character. Again, I cannot think of a closer, so goodbye.